My name is Luke Aldridge. I'm interviewing Vietnam veteran Gene Sullivan, who served in the Army from 1965 to 1968. Mr. Sullivan, this interview will have 4 sections: your life before service, basic training, your time in Vietnam, and your life after service. So let's get started with your background.
Okay.
Where did you grow up, and what was your area known for?
I grew up in Collingswood, New Jersey. That's about 5 miles east of Philadelphia, and just a normal middle-class upbringing. It was a community close to Philadelphia, of course. A lot of people commuted there. Normal education, played baseball, high school football, parks, recreation. And as a child, we used to play in the street, or step ball, hit the bat, just everyday kid next door type of activities.
Can you tell me about your family growing up?
Sure. My father worked for RCA, Radio Corporation of America, based in Camden, New Jersey, where I was born. My mother worked for a department store chain called Bamberger's, and I have a twin sister. Went to school, did everything, and a younger brother who was not quite 9 years younger than myself. Normal family back then. I think we had 1 car. My father got a 2-week vacation. Just go down to the Jersey Shore, spend a week or 2 there. That was our vacation. And other than that, it was the days of what I would call Ozzie and Harriet. 9 to 5, he would work Monday through Friday, home, having supper, and just a normal, average upbringing.
Do you have any memories of your father or other men around you telling war stories from World War II?
That's a good question. I have, or I had, an uncle who was a B-17 pilot in the latter stages of World War II. And he shared some war stories with us. Fortunate for him was that he came in towards the latter part of the war, so the flak and the encounters that he had weren't as severe, but I do recall him talking about that. Another gentleman, not quite related to the family, was a Marine, and I think he was struck at Guadalcanal. He had a bullet wound, and it took him out of the war at that point, but fully recovered, of course. They're the only real war stories that I can relate to. And of course, as a child growing up, you had the World War II war stories and a little bit of Korea and so forth. You heard about that. But other than that, that was my exposure.
Did you have a favorite World War II movie growing up?
No, I mean, I can recall later, as a teenager or whatever, The Great Escape. Steve McQueen was that of the prisoners in the war in Germany. John Wayne in a Guadalcanal or something. But that was the extent of it. Of course, Hollywood back then, they had their influence, and of course, that's terribly misleading when you look at the war from their perspective as to actually what the war is and what you encounter yourself. Totally different. But when they say that's Hollywood, it is Hollywood. Yeah.
A lot of Vietnam veteran memoirs mention John Wayne as an influence on their expectations of war. Do you remember John Wayne that way?
I do. As a matter of fact, I think we were still in the Vietnam War, and he played a Marine colonel in the Green Berets, I think it was called. I remember him from that aspect of it. Again, when he was younger, as I mentioned, Guadalcanal and his appearance in that movie. And of course, just like when we were children, playing cowboys or Indians or whatever, that bang, bang, you're dead. And the bullet wounds were clean and all that. It's totally different. And the chaos that's involved in a firefight is, again, it's 180 degrees from what you think it would be. Yeah.
Before Vietnam, where did you go to college and what did you study?
Well, after high school, I went to Rider College, which is, I'm going to say Trenton, New Jersey. And business was my major. In all honesty, I wasn't mature enough to handle that. My father, at one point, suggested that I join the service and then go to college afterwards. I said, no, thank you. I'm fine. Well, I wasn't. And I was being lured by fraternities and being a business major, taking courses like accounting, you had to stay on top of it. If you got behind, it was very difficult to catch up. I found that out the hard way, and after a year, I was dismissed for a poor scholarship. After my time in service, I did return to college, and I went to Butler University in Indianapolis, Indiana, prestigious school that I did very well in. I graduated in 3.5 years and was Dean's List the entire time. But it took that maturity to make me fully understand what a college education would mean.
In your time before your service, did you hear anything about Vietnam when you were at college?
No. Coincidentally, when I did join the Army, it was March 8th, 1965. And that was the day that American troops literally stepped ashore in Vietnam. I didn't hear a word of Vietnam. If I did, I wasn't paying attention. And it was just background. But from that first day of arrival at the Fort Dix, where I underwent basic training, suddenly Vietnam was a word. And I thought, where is that? And every day after that, it became something that I learned more and more about.
I'd like to move on to the start of your service and basic training now.
Sure.
Would you describe yourself as volunteering, being commissioned, or being drafted?
I volunteered. I knew that, again, the draft was always there. And being susceptible to the draft, I thought I had better options if I joined the service. And so I wasn't quite sure what branch to go into. My father suggested that I find a branch of service that I could sleep in a warm bed at night and get 3 square meals a day. But as usual, I didn't listen to him. And I saw a poster of a Army paratrooper, and I thought that would be very interesting. And that's what lured me to the Army and the Airborne.
Did you expect to go to Vietnam?
No. Again, it wasn't even a thought. I just thought I'd do my time, save, get some experience, and then apply for the GI Bill and go back to school on that. Vietnam and what was going on there, although I was starting to hear more about it, still had not registered to me. During basic training, it was just that basic skills that you're learning, how to break down a weapon, how to fire a weapon, some normal just marching, saluting, being responsible, how to make your bed, how to present yourself, and just responsibility. You had all sorts of jobs to do, whether it was cleaning the floor or whatever it may be. you did everything back then. And of course, the first thing they do in basic is they take you and they take away your civvies, your civilian clothes. They shave your head, and suddenly you look like everybody else. And they just try to break you down and then build you back up again. And it works. And that's what they did. When I went to advanced infantry training after my 2-month assignment for basic, that's when you started to get into more details. How to fire different types of weapons at that point. The M60 machine gun, the .45 Colt pistol, the grenade launcher, things like that. How to throw a grenade, how to prepare your web gear, all that. It just helped you become more of a soldier, which my main occupation was going to be at that point. And escape and evasion and some other details. You just got more involved in that. And you acclimated to those awful hours of getting up at 4 in the morning and getting to bed at 11 at night and little sleep and marching and all the running and physical training that went with it, yeah.
Did you know where Vietnam was before you enlisted?
No clue at all, none. I think somebody said at some point Asia or Southeast Asia, and I still didn't know where that was. I knew Korea, I knew it was over in Asia, of course Japan and Europe, Germany and so forth, but nothing in detail at that point, yeah.
Do you remember anything specific about the last days before your service or the trip to base?
No, other than my father wanted me out of the house and just get on with your life and find something constructive to do. That was pretty much it. Again, I was trying to find myself. At this point, I'm 20 years old. I fell to college, went away to Key West, Florida, dig up bottles on the beach and sell them to tourists, and did some of that. But just meandering at that point, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And with the military giving you direction, that helped me quite a bit. But no, at that point, no. Other than I was taking it day by day, and that's about it.
How difficult was the experience of boot camp for you?
Well, it's an adjustment because up until that point in life, if something occurs, you say, I don't like it, and I'm just going to do something else. Well, you can't do that. The one thing about, once you go into the service, you've got a contract. For whatever it may be, 2 years, 3 years, or whatever it is, and you can't quit. So you had best make the best of it. My father would tell me many times, Gene, make the best of a bad situation. And there was nothing else to do. There weren't any other options. So you had to deal with it. And again, that's part of the maturing process. And I look back at that, and the military gave you some bad days. They gave you a lot of good days. And they forced upon you the maturity and responsibility that you needed. And for that, I'll be forever grateful.
Did anyone around you struggle with boot camp?
You know, some did, but we were all in it together, so we ventured on. The only problem with boot camp, it was March of '65, and in southern New Jersey, it's still cold, it still snows. You're outdoors all the time. Your body, again, for the lack of sleep or whatever, starts to break down. Some people got respiratory infections and things like that. And you might be, boot camp was 16 weeks. So you didn't want to get into a situation where you're halfway through it and you're sick and then you miss time, because then you have to go all the way back and repeat it again from week 1. So people were trying to stay as healthy as they possibly could, and if they had something, to just gut it out. So that was about it. Other than that, no psychological issues that I can recall. You just made the best of it. And you didn't want to show any weakness to the drill instructor, because if he saw that, he's going to just make it all the worse for you. No.
Could you tell me about the time between graduating from boot camp and going to Vietnam?
Well, yeah, when I got after boot camp and advanced infantry training in Fort Gordon, Georgia, I then went to jump school, as we call it, parachute school in Fort Benning, Georgia. That's, I'm going to say 150 miles south of Atlanta. They have 3 big towers, and it's a three-week course that you go through there. Again, a lot of physical training and everything. You're learning how to parachute. You're learning how to jump, how to land. It's called the various parts of your body, your ankle, your shin, your hip, and your shoulder. Hit, shift, and rotate, I think, is what they try to instill in you when you hit the ground. And so the first week you're landing in sawdust. The second week you're landing on dirt. The third week you're jumping out of a plane. But and it's that was when I really felt something of a true accomplishment. I remember my first jump and landing on the ground, and that plane was still overhead, and I said, I got from there to here. That's pretty neat. But that's what that was. But at that time, the war had moved up. And again, we weren't listening to television or anything like that. We just didn't have that availability. So you got little pieces, and the sergeants that were in charge of you would tell you a little bit about it and everything. So in our jump class, I want to say it was probably 1,100, 1,200 people in that class. It was big. And you had a lot of Army personnel, but you had UDT, Underwater Demolition Team. That's the acronym for the Navy SEALs. That's what they were before the SEAL nomenclature came in, and we worked with them, some Air Force commandos and so forth. We're also going through jump school, some Marine Force recon personnel, all that. Well, I remember in our class, probably 800 Army personnel went to Vietnam right from there, or they had a 2-week leave or something, then they went. But 100 people they carved out for Panama, and then 150 they took and they sent us to Fairbanks, Alaska. And you say, Fairbanks, Alaska? Well, it was only 20 years post-Korean War, and they wanted to see how an airborne company, parachute company, could do under Arctic conditions. And that was the main reason why we were there. And Alaska was cold, desolate. Fairbanks, Alaska in 1965 isn't what it is today. There was no pipeline back then. And it was just hard duty, cold, miserable. Around the holiday time, the sun barely came out, if at all. It wouldn't come up until 11 o'clock in the morning, and because of the ice fog of the cold at 60-something below, it was a fog. And by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it was dark again. So imagine you have 150 young men in their 20s walking around in the barracks, what to do if you just merely tapped one another on the shoulder or whatever. A fist fight could break out. So it was tough. Anyway, it was also redundant. How many times can you break down your rifle, put it back together again, shine your shoes, this and that? They had if it was warm enough, and warm enough was 35 below, that you could go outside, and they had a 5-mile ski trail. And we had skis that we would cross-country ski for 5 miles. Again, part of the Arctic training. Other than that, it was awful. And that is what propelled me to go to Vietnam. Again, at that point, once we're out of the training, we were getting Stars and Stripes. That's the name of the newspaper that the military gets. So we were listening to and reading about Vietnam and learning more about it. And at that time, probably in early 66, we were losing about 200, 225 soldiers a week there. And some guys in our unit left early, and unfortunately we saw a couple of their names in the Stars and Stripes, but it didn't deter us. And finally in July of that year, 5 of us left to go to Vietnam. Again, we had 6 more months to go in Alaska, and doing what we were already doing. And I just felt, we're in a war, and what am I going to do with my life? And yes, it's dangerous, but at the same time, if I look back at my life and didn't take advantage of this, would I always question myself as an individual? And so that was one of the reasons that drove me to volunteer to go there. And 5 of us left at that time. And we ended up arriving in Vietnam in August of 1967. August of 1966, excuse me. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to your time in Vietnam.
Okay.
Did anything stick out to you about your flight to Vietnam?
Not really. It was Tiger Airlines, as I recall. Now, we were using commercial planes at that point, I guess whatever we could to send over people at that point. I just remember we left Northern California. It was a nighttime flight, so you try to get some sleep as best you can. We refueled somewhere in Japan and then on to Vietnam. When we got there at Tan Son Nhut Air Base or whatever, they put us on a bus, and the first thing that struck me, 2 things. Number one, the bus had wire cages over the windows, and that I felt was just to prevent somebody from popping a grenade and throwing it inside the bus. The other thing that struck me was the smell that you had. Vietnam, the best way I could describe it, smelled like a wet dog. You had this musk that was just there, and it permeated your clothing. But that was the first thing that struck me. A little vignette, if I may. In the last 15 years, I think, Sylvester Stallone was in a movie playing John Rambo, his character. And he was with some soldiers of fortune, and I think it was in Thailand. And they're going up some river, and some guy, another soldier of fortune individual, said, "This country, it smells like a wet dog." And that excerpt was actually printed in a book, Six Silent Men, that I had mentioned. He read the book. He got that from me. But yes, it did. And it just stayed with you. You didn't realize it, but it just stayed with you. Yeah.
What about the heat?
Well, as you well know, the Georgia summer isn't the best here. The heat and humidity was difficult. And coming from Alaska, I didn't encounter that, so I was used to that. But the heat was brutal, the humidity. The one good thing about the unit I was with the 101st Airborne, is that we were in a thick jungle setting, triple canopies. So you get in that, you're out of the sun. And the temperature could vary by almost 10 degrees being in there and in that shade, as opposed to being in the southern part of Vietnam, the Delta, where it's more wide open, and you didn't have that protection. But it was something, again, you acclimate to, just like you would anything else. I can remember when we weren't out in the field and just being in the tent, and the temperature's 110, 112 degrees, and there's just no relief. There's no fans, there's no setting. We didn't have anything like you see in Afghanistan or Iraq, where you had billets. No, we were just a tent and a cot, and again, out in the field, it was where you laid on the ground. That was where you were, where the ants bite and the leeches live and get on you. Yeah.
What did you expect when you arrived, based on TV or stories that you'd heard?
I think I was expecting the Vietnam people to be appreciative of the fact that we were there. We were helping them to avert communism, to give them a better life. And when I was on that guard duty in Saigon, I saw young kids, children, 5, 6, 7 years old, doing anything they can, begging, looking for sea rations, anything they could get their hands on. Some older people were actually willing to sell their siblings for prostitution or whatever. It was disappointing. I think that's when I began to rethink everything about what was going on there. I had a $50, and it had the Kennedy bust on it. And I remember showing you that, and I remember the kids saying, "Kennedy, Kennedy." So they knew something of America and what was happening. But all in all, I was disappointed with the reaction that I got. And eventually I learned they really just wanted to be left alone. They weren't influenced by this faction or that faction. Just let me do my work in the rice paddies or whatever it may be, but just leave me alone.
Could you describe your first 24 to 48 hours in country?
Yeah, a little bewildered, like anybody would be, learning where to go, where's the latrine, where it is, how do I get back from the latrine to my tent or whatever it is. What's my next assignment? You didn't know day to day where you're going to be or anything, so you couldn't plan anything. I didn't even know what my address was, so if I was going to write to somebody, what's my return address? Because I didn't know how long I was going to be there. And I knew they were going to be anxious to know where I was and what was going on. So that was a little frustrating in that regard, but bewilderment more than anything.
Would you describe yourself as being in combat, in the rear, or something else?
Well, after that guard duty, which was just that, nothing eventful happened. But then I went up to the front, as they would say, and that's where I got to the 101st Airborne base camp. And just coincidentally, I was there when they were recruiting for LRRPs. Now, LRRPs, you're going to hear that name a lot now. It stands for Long Range Reconnaissance Patrol, LRRP. But we just pronounce it LURPS, LRRPs. And they were looking for volunteers to get into their unit. LRRPs were a special unit. There were 4 teams of 6 men, and they were long-range recon. Everybody was a sergeant, which I was at that time. And they didn't wear helmets or standard military gear. They wear what we'd call bush hats, and they were all camouflaged. And they really looked the part. And so that attracted me to them, and I went through an interviewing process. At that time, they were looking for three people to fill positions, and I was one of the three that was taken. But the forward base camp also had an orientation week at the same time. So you wanted to understand now the basics of combat there, booby traps in particular, and what to do and how to conduct yourself. And it was pretty interesting. And again, more physical training, more running and all that we did. But that's how I learned about the LRRPs and how I got into them at that time.
How would you describe the people you served with in terms of economic background, race, or religion?
We were all sergeants. Some of them were what we call lifers. They were anywhere from a master sergeant, sergeant first class, staff sergeant E8, E7, E6, or a buck sergeant like myself. They were hardcore, nice. Yeah, there was profanity and all that, but that's just part of the culture. Most of them came from wooded areas, Tennessee, Georgia, the hill countries, Wyoming, Idaho, places like that, where they were taught to hunt and shoot ever since they were children. And they were the best in the bush, and you learned from them. But that's their economic background, low middle class, I gotta say. Not college educated, but street smart. And the one thing about the military, in order to get advance in rank, and so you had to know your job and what you're doing. So they all had the ability to learn, and their communication was fine. They didn't use the big words, but you understood them very much so. In terms of race and ethnicity, we had one Indian, actual American Indian. I think we had 3 Afro-Americans, rest Caucasian. But break it down, there was a couple guys from New York that were there, New York Italian. It's a language all their own. But we had a good group of people, and everybody got along. We were there's a bonding that goes on in war, and everybody covered one another, and you wanted to know them. You wanted to understand their movements, their reactions, and get to know them, but not to the point where you're going to be influenced by emotion. You had to guard against that, because that sometimes leads to unnecessary things. But yeah, they're all good people.
Did you work alongside any women, either Vietnamese or American?
No. The only time I saw women were, I did come down with malaria towards the end of '66. And so my experience with nurses, just being taken care of, was in the hospitals. And every once in a while, when you came back to the base camp, they had, there was a name for them. But anyway, Red Cross women were there, young women. And I give them a lot of credit for their courage to be over there, even though it was a base camp. Nevertheless, you could be mortared. But they were there, and they were very caring, and anything you wanted to do, you want to talk or this or that, or share a cup of coffee or something. It was very nice. But that was that was really the extent of my involvement with any females.
How did living in Vietnam and meeting Vietnamese people affect you?
Well, that's a very good question. Also, again, my exposure up until that point was I just knew Americans and American people. The Vietnamese were very kind and honorable people. They somehow adopted to learning English, which is a difficult language to learn, of course, but they found a way to communicate and were always respectful. And for the most part, we tried to return that respect. And if nothing else, the old standard hand signals or whatever, or using something that you saw. If I wanted a beer, to hold up a beer and mention that or whatever, it caught their eye. But no, it was just trying to find a way to communicate with people like that. And it worked very well. And I think there was a mutual respect there. Yeah, I don't think we had any issues in that regard.
What do you remember about Vietnamese children?
The poverty and how they had to deal with things. You know, unlike the children that we knew, they weren't getting an education. They were, you know, a lot of it was that red dirt or clay like we see around here. That was their life. They would do menial jobs at the age of 3. It was their own way of survival. You know, we go to the market and stock up for the week. They're on a day-to-day basis, and the water and whatever else they do. So, I mean, that was an adjustment. It was there, we were aware of it, but at the same time, we had our jobs to do, so we didn't dwell on it. We just moved along. But in retrospect, thinking about it now, yeah, they were in the background, I guess.
Do you remember any distinct animals during your time in Vietnam?
Well, they were, first of all, everything seemed to be hostile there. From the ants that would pinch you, to the scorpions that were there, to the snakes that you had that were prevalent, might be too strong of a word, but they were there and you had to be careful of them. I had an encounter with a king cobra, these little bamboo vipers that are as skinny as the pinky and maybe 8-10 inches long, but their bite could kill you in 30 seconds. Highly dangerous. And they call them bamboo because they were in with bamboo and they matched the ground, so it was very difficult to find them. But snakes were an issue. You had tigers. I saw one in the darkness, and it startled me as much as it startled him, and off he went. And just stray dogs, as I mentioned, and cats. But that's really it. I think once we out in the field, we found an elephant print. And now where did that come from? I have no idea. But 4 men could stand in that one footprint, which I thought was amazing. But other than that, we relied on birds and monkeys because if a foreign individual could be an animal, it could be a man, they would grow silent. And if not, they would be chattering away. So if we were in an area and we could hear the chattering, we knew that the enemy wasn't there. when it got quiet, we knew they were coming.
You used the chatter of the birds and the monkeys.
Yeah, exactly. So, for instance, if we were being inserted into an area on a mission, and we always did this at dusk. So you had about no more than a half hour once you were inserted to find cover, bed down for the night. That means if the enemy, the North Vietnamese or the Viet Cong, thought you might be being dropped into an area, they couldn't locate you because it was dark. And at the same time, once you got in, you didn't know if it was going to be a hot area, if they were there, or if they weren't there. And once you got in, and the 6 of you were leaping out from 10, 15 feet, you hit the ground and you made a beeline for the jungle, the dense foliage. And then the helicopter would fly away, and you're waiting for normalcy to reoccur. But your heart is beating so fast, it's interfering with your hearing. But once the chatter starts to return and you hear the monkeys and you hear the birds, then you realize it's safe. And that's when we moved out and to find a safe haven to bed up for the night.
Did you experience any culture shock in Vietnam?
No, I mean, their values were different. Their dress was a little strange. Not so much the men. The men would either wear dark slacks and a white shirt. I mean, and this is in urban areas. And the ladies would wear dark slacks and a type of garment, I forget the name of it, that flowed down. They all looked attractive in what they were doing. They presented themselves very well. And then in the rural areas where you had to get around and do everything, the men wore basic khaki shorts and some sort of a shirt or top or no top at all. And the ladies, loose clothing, as I recall, hair pulled back. They ate this betel nut, it was, and I couldn't tell you why they did it, but it turned their teeth black. And a 30-year-old woman would look like a grandmother at times. It was strange. They didn't sit in chairs. They sat down, they squatted. And they had, they used a long pole with a tripod at either end, and that would use to carry things. So they weighted that at either end. It would be super, super heavy, but they found a way of, once it got put on their shoulders and people would help them pick it up. And as you moved along, you sort of danced with it in a sense. And of that going up and down, you didn't fully feel the weight of it. It's genius. And they were able to, that's how they moved along with things. Yeah, that's pretty much the culture changes that I noticed there.
Did you personally encounter the Viet Cong?
Yeah, I did. We were in an area once, and we were being sniped at, and we had actually captured 2 Viet Cong, and we loaded them into a helicopter and got them out for interrogation. And we continued on with our mission. I thought we would have been extracted, but they wanted to continue on. Anyway, late in the day, we stopped and went off in this area, but there was a trail there, and I was told to go out and at the trail and make sure nobody was coming along. And as I did, everybody else began to bed down for the night, and they had their last meal. So I'm out there waiting. They had these huge anthills. They could be easily 10 feet high, and they've been around for centuries there. They weren't active, but they were just these huge mounds. And I'm sitting on the side of that, and I'm starting to get annoyed because my 5 teammates back there seem to have forgotten about me, and I haven't eaten yet, and I still wanted to bed down my gear too. So I foolishly put my rifle next to this tree, and I'm trying to catch their attention, like, I want to eat, and for them to see me. And all of a sudden I heard a branch or a stick break behind me, and I just froze. And I slowly turned. Now I'm camouflaged, head to toe, the face paint on, green, brown, and everything. And I slowly turned, and no more than 10 feet away, if that, is this VC. I remember him distinctly. He had black shorts. He had a long sleeve khaki shirt on, shirt tail out, and he had what was a German Mauser at his hip. And I looked, I didn't blink, I did nothing. I just froze because my rifle's here, and if I went to get it, that movement's going to. So I just looked at him, and I remember, keep your mouth open a little. If you do, you won't blink. So I did that. I'm watching him, and then I see his eyes dance around, and I realize he doesn't see me. And I'm there, and there's some foliage in between us, of course, but he doesn't see me. Anyway, he moved on slowly, and I'm thinking to myself, please, guys, look and see what's happening. Anyway, he, as he's going on, and his back is turned to me, now I'm reaching slowly for my rifle. I pick it up, I have it, I go, aim like this, and I squeeze, and the trigger's not moving, and I realize I had it on safety. Oh. So anyway, I slowly was moving it, because if you go click, click to full automatic, he's going to hear that. So and all of a sudden, one of the guys just away from me sneezed, and he couldn't get his hat over his mouth enough. The VC turned around, rode away to me. At that point, I had the rifle, and he made a dash back that way, and I fired, but there were some trees there, and I must have hit the trees because he was still running. And behind him was another guy coming up with a carbine who I didn't see. My back was turned to him. And that was my first encounter, as close as it was. And again, it was my fault. I could have gotten myself killed for my error of doing that. But that's one of the things about war and combat. So anyway.
Are there other encounters you'd like to share?
Well, we've had other times. Again, we've captured some, and another time we were in an area, and it was a very dangerous area. So they put 2 teams in, and one team, we got in there. One team went out, and they ended up capturing a nurse, and it was on the run. Now they had left their packs with us. Our packs were 75 pounds, heavy. So we had their packs. They're there. They're running. I was the RTO, the radio person at that time. They radioed to us that they were evading these North Vietnamese that were chasing them, and where they were going. And we tried to give them coordinates to a landing zone to get to. We fired up, we had a chopper coming in to get them. And we had an F-4 Phantom coming over, which is unusual to happen. Anyway, I provided the radio. Now, normally, anytime we give out coordinates, we do it in a coded message. Because of the sense of urgency, I circumvented that, and we just went with the coordinates. Well, evidently, somehow, they figured out where we were from that. They got it. Our group was picked up with the nurse, went back to basic. At the same time, we were there with the packs. We can't move because we can't carry 2 75-pound packs. So we just stayed where we were. The next day, they were coming back in, and while we're waiting there for them, we had a new guy with us, and he was out on the OP outpost. And all of a sudden, we see a Vietnamese scout go down this trail, which was about 30, 35 yards away. And we all lay low, and then another guy came down shortly after that, which meant the main body was still coming. And we looked around for this new guy. Martin was his name. That's all I can recall. Anyway, the team leader said, Sullivan, see if you can find Martin, because we were concerned now, where is he? So I went out looking around for him, and as I'm going out there looking for him, all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. And when Trump was that assassinated attempt where he talked about the bullets whizzing by his ear, that's real. And I could feel that, and you felt that first before that sound of the rifle, of the bullet. And I hit the ground, boom. More gunfire came in after that, rolled to this big type of oak banyan tree, got behind that, and the bullets were just flying into that tree. For a second there, I didn't think I was going to have any tree left, the way it was taking out these big chunks of bark. It was a .30 caliber that they were firing that was doing that. Anyway, it was coming right by my eye, and I couldn't even turn to fire my weapon because it was that close. As Martin shows up, I told him to get down. I came around to the other side to get a peek, and then fired off a burst, and they, again, back to me. And then they started to move forward. I'm going to say there was probably 3 dozen of them. The good thing was that the other 4 guys off to the side, the flank, they had no idea about them. So when they made their charge, they all fired and hit a number of them. They, again, pulled back right away and scurried out of the area because they didn't know what they were in at that point, thank goodness. But hearing them charge and being pinned down like that, what little hair I had on my head was standing straight up, I could tell you that. And the fear of that, saying, how do I prevent this charge from happening? I almost saw my life come before me at that point. That was probably the most dangerous encounter that I had. Anyway, then the team leader, I'm beginning to think he doesn't like me, because then he told me to go out and check on the blood trail that was there, which I did. And now I'm going out and I'm thinking, I've got a magazine in my gun, in my rifle, my M16. If I find them, how many rounds can I get off? Excuse me, before they came after me. But anyway, found a sandal, big blood spots like that, which tells me I know one was mortally wounded. And a rice sack. Now, anybody with a rice sack, that's everything. That's everything, rice. And that's what they do. They eat that all the time, and that was it. So if you drop that, you have no substance. So I knew we had a couple kills there. Anyway, 2 other guys, the unit that came out the day before came in, and 2 of them came up, and we traced a little more, and then there wasn't any trail. They moved off the trail. So we were too far out to engage any further. So we just pulled back at that point, grabbed our gear, moved out to another area, and that was it. Yeah. Other times where I've been a team leader, a mission, I've seen them from a distance and called in artillery and everything. But that was, and we had another encounter where we had shot a North Vietnamese lieutenant. That was a little chaotic, and his intestines were hanging out and everything, and it was a real mess. And all you could do was take some water, pour it on it, to keep it moist and put a loose bandage on him. We got him out, but I don't think he made it. We got him to the medical tent, but he looked like he was in pretty bad shape. And they're pretty much the encounters. Later, we had other units that were, I think April of '67, we had more kills in our 30-man unit than a battalion did. We thought we were invincible, and then subsequently in May, we lost 2 teams in a matter of weeks, and suddenly we weren't so infallible, and we tried to come to the aid of one team that was pretty well decimated, but base had another idea, and they told us to stay where we are, and they got help on the ground, but it made us realize that we're vulnerable, and yeah, they were just some of the encounters we had there. Yeah.
Do you remember seeing Agent Orange being sprayed?
I didn't see it being sprayed, but I saw the effects of it, how the defoliage and what it does and everything. I remember walking through an area of that, and it might have happened weeks or a month beforehand, and it told me I was in the wrong area, because if I'm not hiding in foliage, I'm not where I need to be. So we got out of that area, but I was surprised at what it does to that. I've also, later in life, had friends who've died of Agent Orange, and subsequent cancer that it can do. But Agent Orange was used a fair amount in the Central Islands. It was used a lot in the Delta more. And I can't tell you why, but it was. But it was, the line companies used that quite a bit. And again, being in a recon unit with minimal personnel, we didn't find ourselves as that wasn't part of our area of expertise.
Were you concerned at the time about Agent Orange?
No. It was only in a couple years later that I heard more about it. Again, I was there in 1966, 1967, and we were still building up into the war. It didn't plateau out until 60, 68, 69, and then 70, and then decrease from there. So it was used, but it wasn't used on an everyday common basis. I remember, was it Robert Duvall who said, "I love the smell of napalm in the morning," or something like that. I mean, some of these Hollywood movies were just, they were interesting. Yeah.
What were some of the ways you coped with the war?
Well, we didn't know when our next mission was, and so we had to be ready all the time. You couldn't relax. Ask anybody who was in Vietnam, they know exactly how many days they have left in country every day. It might be, I've got 180 days in a wake up, might be 120 days in a wake up or whatever, but they always knew how many days. And it was just getting through that day, whatever it may be. And you had missions, 5-day missions or whatever. You didn't like to think of that, it was too far out to do, but you wanted to get through it. That's all. There was nothing to look forward to, just other than surviving the next day. That's in our job. That's all that's all we could look forward to. But when you were back and you knew you weren't going out for a few days, you could relax, you could have a beer, and you made the best of that. Again, being in a special unit and being held in high regard, ice was a premium in Vietnam. So the medical tents always got ice, and they'd be flown in from the ships offshore. The helicopters would bring them in. And so the hospitals and the food services would get their ice. And we would go down to the mess tents and see what we could scrounge up. And everybody liked the LRRPs. So we'd get a bag of ice in these waterproof bags, quick, bring it back. And we would dig a hole almost the size of this table and then put the bag of ice in there, take a case of beer at the time and pour that in it, and then put it in the hole and cover it up. So it was only a small hole like this bowl or less that you could stick your hand in and pull out a beer. And the sun kept the being filled in with dirt. You had no sun on the beer, so it always stayed cold. That was our refrigerator, and that's how we look forward to little things like that, little days. We all had these specialized knives that, like Rambo had. They were Randall knives, and we'd play Mumbly Peg or something like that. Little games like that just kept you busy. Obviously, you had to do first things first, make sure your rifle's clean and this and that, and always have your pack ready because you get an order like that. But that's what we did. We just little enjoyment, things like that, and we all bonded, and it was wonderful. Yeah.
Did you regret volunteering after you got to Vietnam?
I questioned that because, again, I had a choice. I could have volunteered for the draft. I didn't know that at the time, and do 2 years rather than 3. So I volunteered for a 3-year enlistment. Then I volunteered for the Army Airborne to be a paratrooper. Then I volunteered for Vietnam. And then I volunteered for this LRRPs, which was considered the most dangerous assignment in Vietnam. And then after I'm in it, I'm thinking, did I just go one too many here? So I remember reflecting on that, but all in all, it worked out, and it was the right decision to make. But did I question my sanity at that point? Yes, I did. LRRPs we were special. And I guess there's about 5 of us today that still are alive, and we talk about things on occasion, use holiday time and whatever. But we were all Recondo Ranger paratroops, so we were highly skilled in what we did. We relied on each other. Again, early stages of the war, and that's our time, they didn't have the intelligence that the Army didn't, where you just blindly send 1,500 men into an area and say, well, they're here somewhere, go find them. No, like anything, it's time and money. So instead of sending 1,500 men, send 6. And that's what we did. So 6 of us would be off here, another 6 here, another 6 here, another 6 here. 5 days. Find them. Find their movement. Find their, how many, where they are. Is there a base camp nearby? Track them. If necessary, call in artillery on them if you think that's the case. Or the most dangerous aspect, try to capture one. And that was our job. And again, we were special. Years later in the war, come post-Way, when they had the Tet Offensive, that's that's when they changed assignments and LRRPs weren't used anymore in 1968. But those early stages, it was special, and history is yet to really find us. It will at some point, but that was our job. But volunteering, yeah, it was a special thing. Matter of fact, for every person that was in the LRRPs, you put in 9 months, you're getting a Bronze Star, and that's what we did. So, yeah, look back, don't regret it. No, I was lucky and fortunate.
What was the most memorable friendship you had during your time in Vietnam?
Well, it's unusual. I have a friend, had a friend that I knew for years. We met in 1960. We were on the high school football team. He came from one region, I came from another. We ended up playing on the high school football team together. He was the star halfback. I was the offensive end and defensive halfback, and we had a bond. He went to one college, I went to another. We both realized that didn't work. We joined the Army together, got all through basic, advanced infantry, airborne. There was no guarantee after that, but somehow we got sent to Alaska together, and we ended up volunteering for Vietnam and going over there together. And we actually got into the LRRPs together. He got sent to a line company, but after a couple of months, we found him and got him into our unit. And he was my rock, and I was his. And we literally fought back to back together. After college, we ended up, or after the service, we went to college at Butler University and graduated from there. And at that point, we drifted. I went the corporate route and began a career. He decided he still had a little more adventure in him, and he went off to Europe and actually became a cruise ship captain. Unfortunately, we talk about cancer and post-Vietnam, and it took his life a couple of years ago. But good guy. But he was my rock. Yeah.
What was his name?
Bruce Redmer. Good man, solid, and I think he had a lot to do with who I am today. Yeah.
What was the most beautiful thing that you saw in Vietnam?
Vietnam's a beautiful country. I remember, again, when you're in a helicopter and you're high up in the air where they can't shoot at you, and looking out at the scenery, I mean, it could have been Hawaii. It's magnificent. And I just remember the palm trees, some of the settings, even in the deepest of the jungles. There was one place with a little waterfall that was nearby in a rushing stream, and there was a couple of Vietnamese hooches that we came upon at homes. And I thought, wow, what a beautiful setting this is. But it can be beautiful. And then some of the urban areas, and so not much, but it is. Matter of fact, I'm going back to Vietnam in February of next year with a group of people, and I've heard so much about how it has changed for the better, and I'm looking forward to that. But you know, I had a French culture before we got there, and yeah, they did a nice job, and I have a lot of respect for them and their way of life.
Who did you write to or receive letters from when you were in Vietnam?
Boy, anybody who would write back. It was funny. certainly my parents, my sister, I had two grandfathers at the time, high school buddies. That was pretty much it. I made a conscious effort. I didn't want a girlfriend, and I dated before, but I didn't want to have that distraction when I was there. I didn't worry about, you hear about these Dear John letters and so forth. I didn't want any part of that, so I was carefree in that regard. But anytime you got letters, it was wonderful. And of course, when you sent a letter, you just wrote on it, and I think in the postmark section, you just wrote free. You know, where you'd put a stamp, you wrote free. And I'm trying to recall now, in the letters that I got, if they had to pay postage, I imagine they did to some APO or something somewhere to get it there. But I would get little gifts and stuff like that. Now, it's funny, being in the LRRPs, when I got there, I was the youngest person at that time in October of 66. And I saw all these LRRPs, these men, hardened guys, going around. They had a gold earring through their left ear. And I said to this fellow that I knew from Alaska, I said, Fred, what's that all about? And he said, it's an old Mexican saying for good luck and no harm will come to you. And so Rodriguez, his grandmother sent it, so all the LRRPs adopted it. So I said, does that mean I'm getting a gold earring? And he said, yeah. I said, oh boy. So anyway, an hour later, somebody comes in with a bottle of Australian whiskey. I took a couple of slugs, and they took a needle and they punctured my ear and put a little string through it, and the blood hardened that. And then the next chance I got, I went into Tuiwa and got a gold earring. So, and had a picture taken in a shop in Tuiwa. And I sent the photograph home to my mother. Well, the next mail, I got a thing of lipstick. She sent me lipstick. And I said, no, you don't understand. But it was just a funny thing at that. And it was during that time, of course, as soon as we left Vietnam, that earring left. But that was different, yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember any American TV shows or songs from your time in Vietnam?
Yeah. What was the name of it? Rawhide. Clint Eastwood. There's another, it was a World War II thing. It was a half-hour thing that went on. Oh, what was the name of that? About an army squad in Germany. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Senior moment, forgive me. It was just a one-word thing they called it. I remember that because, again, when you're in the hospital, and I put 6 weeks in with malaria, after your initial treatment and everything to make sure your spleen doesn't burst, you're pretty much in recovery until it's out of your system. So whatever, you sit around and you watch movies. So in the evening, when they're not taking your blood or whatever, you sit on these benches and they have a little movie screen and you're watching a movie. So whatever it was, that filled our time and what we did. I just remember watching some of those shows that we had there. Other than that, you didn't, trust me, even in the forward base area, they didn't have movies at night. You didn't have any illumination at all. You couldn't take the chance. But hospital areas, they were pretty well fortified, so you could, yeah.
And you said the show is Rawhide?
Rawhide was one of the shows that I remember that. I think it's Ward Bond might have been the guy that had it, and Rowdy Gates, Clint Eastwood, he played that character. As a matter of fact, even when I got to Tokyo on my R&R, I turned on the television in the hotel, and I was so excited. They got Rawhide, and I see him riding up, and he rides up, and all of a sudden he starts to speak Japanese. It was so disappointing, but yeah, that was, they were some of the ones I remember. It was in the 60s, but again, we didn't have access to that. And being in Fairbanks, Alaska, you didn't have really TV there yet. I remember watching the 49ers football team, but all the games were delayed 3 weeks. So if I'm watching a football game, it had been played 3 weeks ago. So that was it in 1965, yeah.
What was your most expensive or frequent purchase at the PX?
You know, what did we have? We didn't have a PX. In the base camp, you had a PX. We only got to the base camp twice a year. I think for the money that we were making, and I'm trying to remember, I think I was a Sergeant E5, so I had my base pay, I had my combat pay, I had my overseas pay, and I had my jump pay. And I think I made $3,200 that entire year. Oh yeah, a hazardous duty pay was another one. And that was it. So I think we took maybe $25, $30, and the rest was sent home. Used it to get a haircut, which was, I just remember they used a lime to clean your hair, squeeze a lime and lime juice in there to clean your hair, and cut it down to almost a buzz cut. And I'm trying to remember if you were in an area that you could buy a beer or whatever in the forward base or whatever. We got these Red Cross packages, and they had things. Beer we had to buy, I know that, but a case of beer was $2.50 at that time. So that was about it. I couldn't remember what else we do. Every once in a while, you'd put something in the mail for Mother's Day or send your mother $5 or something like that to do. But that was it. Yeah, no big expenses. Although we did, one time the Randall knife that I said that we carried, again, it was just like Rambo had. And that cost $150 back in 1966, I think, yeah. And it's worth over $2,000 today. But yeah, that was a big expense, I guess.
That's the end of my service questions. Would you like to talk a little bit more about your role in reconnaissance?
Well, again, just to have an understanding, because a lot of people think of we weren't infantry. I never wore a helmet. We wore camouflage, or in times, if the area was going to be open, we wore black pajamas. And we used the camouflage had like a sand color, so we would try to give more of a Asian look to ourselves, and changed our hats to a green bush hat. And with our green kerchief that we wore, we almost looked like Vietnamese from a distance. So we went out like that. But again, we were there not to engage, but to gather intelligence. Or again, if that meant capturing one, fine, that was pretty much it. But when we were escaping evasion, or we weren't there to encounter. We didn't have the armaments to do so. We all carried M16s. We carried about 230, 40 rounds of ammunition. We carried a .45 shoulder holster. M79 grenade launcher with the stock cut off, front sights cut off, 3 fragmentation grenades and a white phosphorus, we call it a Willie Peter, that gave you a smoke cover for escaping, and our knife, and a block of C4, which is used for detonation. If we needed to blow out some trees to create a landing zone, we did that. And we had a claymore mine that we all carried. So at night when you were out, you could set up your claymores to give you a little protection if they've really discovered you. And rations, 2 meals a day for 5 days, and you put them in a sock, tied it off so it wouldn't make a noise. I carried 14 canteens because you didn't know what you were getting there depending on the time of year. Monsoon, you could cut it down a little bit, but otherwise those blue lines you saw on your map weren't there. They were dried up riverbeds. So all that ends up with 75 pounds on you. And when you're hovering in and you're high up, and our area of operation could be 2 miles out, it could be 25 miles out. And so you're up high, about 3,000 feet, and last mile and a half, 2 miles, you drop down, and the Central Highlands were all ridges. So we're one side of the ridge line, and then as you're coming in the last half mile, you come over to your side of the ridge line, and you're at treetop level. They can hear you, but by the time they hear you, they can't get a shot off because you've already passed. And then once they get to the landing zone, you're leaping from that helicopter 10 feet or so, and you're hitting the ground with that weight on you. And when you're 21, 22, you can do that. But it catches up with you. So I have 2 artificial hips. I have an artificial knee. If you talk to the remaining guys that I know, they've all had knee replacements, and it's just part of it, and you deal with it later in life. But so you're in for 5 days, and again, you never talked. I couldn't have a conversation with you out there. I'd whisper or hand and eyes. That's what we did. We actually took pills to prevent us from defecating for 5 days. If you had to urinate, you laid on the ground and rolled over and did it, so the splashing sound wouldn't be there. You learned to distinguish between a 2-legged animal and a 4-legged animal. You learn how to move through the bush so that you're not breaking branches, and how you can glide through. The expression, stay alert, stay alive, was never more important. Listening. That's what you did. And everybody knew they were depending on one another 100%. And when you went out on these missions, not every team would go out at the same time. So, but when your turn came and people were there, you just didn't leave. They all walked down with you. You got in a truck with your gear, deuce and a half as they called it. They would come down to the landing pad, the helicopter's there. You get in, last orders are given. 2 guys inside the helicopter, the other 2 are sitting just like you and I are, with our feet out the door there. And as the helicopter's lifting off, and you look to the guys that are with you, not a word is said. That's it. And still emotional to me today, but that's your sign. And the bravest men I ever knew. So that's the LRRPs, and that's what they were. Yeah.
I'd like to talk now about your post-service life.
Sure.
What relationship in your life was most changed by your service?
Well, maturity and responsibility, first and foremost. And I learned that I could do things that I never thought I could do. So, and I learned not to quit and persevere, and it helped me in my professional life as well. So, just learning and understanding, and just the maturity that went with that, I think is what it did. You know, when you come back from Vietnam, and remember, for every guy that was in the bush, every soldier, there were 10 people in a support position behind him. So when some people say, well, I'm a Vietnam veteran, I get it. But were you a Vietnam combat veteran? There's a difference. And not to belittle those that didn't, happy they were there and did their job and so forth. And if you're in graves and registration or the hospital or some other things, you might have some PTSD, and we understand that. But it's understanding that. So when I came back, I still had that adventure in me, and it was getting that out of me. It took a while to do so. I was still that bravado, and you had to be careful not to engage in a fight or something like that. It took me a little while to throttle back, I'm going to say. But that's, no, the maturity and responsibility, you know, over my high school buddies that went to college and did their thing and got out, they, a little carefree, but they didn't know the meaning of what life and death could be. And so I think it gave me an edge up on things. And when they talk about, oh, I'm going to go hunting, or I'm going to do this, or so, no, I've done that. I'm not interested. You want to go bear hunting? I'm not interested. I faced the most dangerous animal there was, man. So, no, that's it. That's it.
You mentioned earlier that your dad encouraged you to enter the military. How did your relationship with your dad change when you got home?
I think he had a respect for me, and he could see me over the years evolve into a successful businessman, and again, college graduate, and marry, settle down, have a family, and so forth. He saw me grow as an individual. He was in the Coast Guard in World War II. So understanding my job, and the 101st Airborne was a known entity and held in high regard in World War II. So being part of that, 25 years later, and I think he had a good deal of respect for what I was doing. Yeah.
Did you know any anti-war veterans?
In college, Butler University in Indianapolis was actually a very conservative school. And this is 68, 69, 70, 71, at the height of the war and everything. There was a small contingent of protesters there, and it was pretty much let them do their thing. That's fine. I remember in my latter part of Vietnam, it was June of 1967, and we're out, and we had a major from intelligence come out in the field with us. We were always wary about officers in the field, especially if they were getting short in their days there, because we felt they were medal hunting and looking to take unnecessary chances, which endangered all of us. And this person, his name was Jan Lahamadou, and he was actually my company commander when I went through advanced infantry training at Fort Gordon. And never really knew him. He'd show up for roll call or this and that and see him out there. Anyway, we started talking on this one little break, or when I say talking, whispering. And I said to him, sir, where are you going after, because he was a major at that time, where are you going after this? And he said, I've got a real cushy assignment. I'm going to be heading up an ROTC unit at a Midwestern university. Remember, this is June of '67, and an assignment in an ROTC unit is a 3-year assignment. So I said to him, what university would that be? He said, Kent State University. So he was there when that happened. And unfortunately, when responsibility comes, there's a big umbrella, and he got caught up at that. I don't know what happened to him, but it couldn't have been good. So that was it. I will say this about Butler University. I couldn't tell from my professors where they stood on the war. It wasn't mentioned in the classroom. It just wasn't. It would have been interesting, but in today's world, how they would have reacted to that back then. But you didn't know. I couldn't tell if they were Republican or Democrat, and that's all changed now. But at the time, no, I didn't have that. And I will say this: the influence of the war and the back then in the field. I have a pamphlet that was we would find them out there they'd drop in different places, and I forget the exact verbiage, but it was lay down your arm, American GI, lay down your arms, come over to our side, you'll be treated with respect and blah, 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 and that sort of stuff. And there was one that I didn't keep, and I'm sorry I didn't, but it was a picture of a group in Haight-Ashbury in the San Francisco area of protesters. And obviously it was propaganda they were using for us at the time, and what our thoughts were at that time, and they were evolving. But that was, but at that point I was back. I wanted to get on with my life, and I wasn't about to participate in either way with that. Yeah.
So you saw propaganda of an anti-war protest?
I saw propaganda in pamphlets that they would drop in Vietnam. The North Vietnamese and the VC would drop, trying to change our minds about it. There was you may have heard of a Hanoi Hannah. I don't know if you have or not, but she's a real person. And we would fix up our radios in the forward base area, and you could get her, and she would say, "American GIs, you lost 40 battalions today." Of course, that's crazy. But she'd just give that, you should think about surrendering and coming to our area and stuff like that. That was the only exposure we had. When other than that, I didn't have any, when I came back in country, when I got back here, I pretty much, again, put on my civvies, or I still had 6 months ago. Once I finished service and got out of it, I didn't get involved in anything. And some of the demonstrations, primarily on college campuses, as you will recall, no. I mean, there's certain people, and my feelings about the war have changed. They have. It was unnecessary. The Gulf of Tonkin incident was so wrong, and Lyndon Johnson was so mistaken in his judgment and who he was being led by to do that. I mean, he's ultimately responsible for that, but it was just an unnecessary war, as Iraq was with the weapons of mass destruction. And we just have to find a way to be absolutely certain about whatever we commit our citizens, our American men and women to do. That all has to change, and I think it will. But you have people like in the war, like a John Kerry, the former senator who also ran for president. I have nothing but disdain for him. His whole career was built on a lie. He was a Navy officer. He was on a ship offshore. Again, Harvard graduate, but felt that he, in his own right, was letting his time go to waste being on that. And he heard about the Swift boats, so he put in the papers and he got assigned to a Swift boat. Now, a Swift boat was going up and down the Mekong Delta, had a crew of about 6 people on board, and they were there for interdiction, contraband, whatever it may be. And yet, he somehow, in the space of 3 months, somehow received 3 Purple Hearts, 1 day of sick time, 3 Purple Hearts, and he got a Silver Star because he shot a person on the shoreline, a soldier, went up there, finished him off with the rifle that he took with him, and to this day will not release his naval records, but made a point of attacking every soldier over there as misguided baby killers. And for that, I'll never forgive him.
How did you interact with the VA in the years after the war?
You know, I guess in '72, I was working in the New York metro area, and I had strep throat, and I wasn't making a lot of money back then. And whatever my medical coverage was, I really couldn't afford it. And I figured, oh, you know, I'm a vet, let me go to the VA. And and that was in the Bronx, probably not the best choice of places to go to. Anyway, I spent the entire day before I got some sort of, wasn't penicillin, but it was something else that I got. And it worked, but I had to spend the entire day there and go through all the red tape. And I said, I'm never going back again. Well, fast forward to here, and I guess it was about 3 or 4 years ago, I'm talking to another vet, and he mentioned going to the VA for some help, and he said, they're really good, you ought to give them a try. And I did, and I haven't looked back. I think the Veterans Administration is fantastic. Now, it may not have been 6, 7 years ago, but they see everybody on time. You will be seen within 15 minutes of the time of your appointment. And they adhere to that. And try going to a private practice and doing that. So, no, I'm very impressed. I've had a number of procedures done, and I have nothing but A marks for them.
Who, since the war, have you talked to about Vietnam?
Not many. I mean, my wife knows about it. My children know about it. My high school buddies, of course, they know about it. Some of the guys I golf with know a little bit about it. Vietnam and the experiences there, unless you're a fellow veteran, it's very difficult to articulate that, to make them understand what you're doing. There's an Air Force colonel near me, and there's a bunch of them in my neighborhood. And learning about it, LRRP, he thought I was just an infantry guy that went out on ambushes at night. No clue whatsoever. And I tried to explain it to him a little to give him an idea, figuring he might have a better idea. Nah, it didn't work. So I don't go into great detail about it. You know, even in my work, for all the years that I was in the relationships I formed with people and so forth, very few people knew that I was a Vietnam combat veteran. I didn't want to have them question that. On my resume, when I graduated from college, it said, besides Butler University, U.S. Army, 1965, 1968, honorable discharge, period. And hoped they wouldn't ask me anything more about it. Because I didn't feel that anything would be gained on my part from doing so. So I didn't. But that's, other people know. They know I served and whatever, friends, cousins, nieces, nephews. They don't know the details. And I just got tired of trying to explain something. That's all.
Have you been to the wall in D.C.?
I have. I've got friends on that wall. It's impressive. You know about it, how it goes down, and you'll see high school kids where they're there on a class trip or whatever, and there's running around the grab ass, whatever you call it. They're just, once they start that descent, the chatter stops. It's solemn, and it gets very emotional. But you do. And a friend of mine who also served a different unit, different time, but he said, Gene, he said, there's 1,000 stories a day that could be told right there. And you see flowers or trinkets or whatever it may be, things of remembrance left there. The stenciling of the name, all that. Yeah, it's it tugs at you. It really does. It's impressive. Yeah. I even, a few years back, 20 years ago, I had a wedding in France. A high school friend, his daughter was getting married there. And after the wedding, we went to Normandy. And to go through the cemetery in Normandy, all those years later, you get the same result. And I think that'll always be there for the Vietnam Memorial. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you were planning on going back to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
When are you going?
Going in February of 2025, along with 2 other couples.
And where are you planning to go?
Well, we're going to start in Singapore, and then we're going to go to Hanoi, to Hue, Nha Trang, Saigon, and there are the Cu Chi tunnels that are right in that area. That'll be our Vietnam experience, and then we'll move over to Cambodia and then Thailand and depart Bangkok. But I'm not expecting, well, we'll see how it's all changed. And again, it's a beautiful country, and I'm sure they've made it even far better than I ever knew it to be. But we'll, in Hanoi, I think the Hanoi Hilton is on the list, places to be. And I'm sure we'll have people say that, you know, this is what we did to defeat the America and everything. And I'm not going to engage in any back and forth there. My only response is, it was a war our country chose not to win. That's all. We had the means. We just didn't execute in that manner. And so be it. And in a way, I'm glad we didn't. A lot of lives would have been lost and a lot of destruction. So glad it's over. Yeah.
Well, this is my last question.
Sure.
Do you have a favorite book, poem, or movie about Vietnam?
I'm not a poet. there were excerpts of different movies, but there's not a Vietnam movie yet that I can find that got it 100% correct. Little parts of it that you had, and just the little things in Vietnam. If you were there, you knew it. If you're going through the elephant grass and you're on point, and let me tell you, if somebody says, take the point, that gets your attention because you're the first guy out, and everybody behind you is your responsibility. Not only are you looking, you're being aware where you're stepping and all that stuff. Little things. So you go through the elephant grass. Yeah, you get a paper cut. Well, grass can cut you that way. So you wore a black leather glove on your left hand. And as you went through that, and your other hand is on the trigger of your rifle. But you wouldn't see that in any, even the statue in Washington of the 3 Vietnam veterans there, the soldiers. One guy is wearing a M17 gas mask on his hip. I never saw a gas mask there. They didn't have them. It was unnecessary. They didn't use them. But somebody didn't get the memo when they did that statue. So there's not a specific movie, but little excerpts here and there. The book, I like 6 Silent Men because it's real, and I know it's real, and I know there's no BS in that. What they said, and Ray Martinez, who I trained and wrote the book, what he said is all. There's no pork chop in there. It's the real thing.
You mentioned Rambo a couple times throughout the interview. What are your thoughts on those movies?
I have seen some of them, yeah, and again, unrealistic. Just it made for good theater, but no, none of that. No.
All right. Well, that's all I've got. Thank you very much, Mr. Sullivan.
Luke,
it's been a
thank you.
fantastic interview. Thank you.
Pleasure. Enjoyed it.